Good afternoon, folks. Appreciate you joining in today. I want to speak for a little while this afternoon about Sledgehammer Christians, Sledgehammer Christianity. You know, there's a little verse that's been in my mind from the book of Galatians, chapter number 6, and it's verse number 1. But just before we get to this particular verse, the previous chapter speaks about the fruit of the Spirit, living in the Spirit, and walking in the Spirit. The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. Against such there is no law. And verse number 1 of chapter 6 says, Brethren, if a man be overtaken with a fault, ye which are spiritual, restore such an one in the spirit of meekness, considering thyself, lest thou also be tempted. Bear ye one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. Ye which are spiritual, restore such an one in the spirit of meekness. If we are born again of the Spirit of God, indwelt by the Spirit of God, yielded by the Spirit of God, seeking to live a Spirit-filled life, one of the results of that will be the fruit of gentleness and the fruit of meekness. The fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, gentleness, meekness, and so it goes on. And if we see a brother or a sister in the Lord and we see a fault in their life, or maybe a mistake that they make, or something that we don't agree with, or maybe they even fall into sin, what's the best way to deal with that? Paul says, writing to the church at Galatia, if you're spiritual, restore, not tear down or destroy, but rather restore. And the idea there is build them up again, lift them up again, get them on their feet again, encourage them, strengthen them, support them, build them up, nourish them and cherish them, restore them, and restore such an one in the spirit of meekness. Meekness is not weakness. Meekness is power that is under control. It speaks of humility and tenderness, gentleness, meekness. Restore such an one in the spirit of meekness, considering yourself, lest you also be tempted. And then bear one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. But sadly, if we are honest, there's not a lot of gentleness, there's not a lot of meekness in the lives of a lot of Christians. Suddenly, if somebody falls or has a fault or falls into sin or does something that a Christian might disagree with, all too often the sledgehammers come out, and all too often, rather than such an one being restored in the spirit of meekness, they are torn down, they are broken, they are hammered, they are crushed, they are destroyed, they're vilified, and so it goes on. And that is certainly not evidence of spirituality on the part of the individual who is calling out the faults of another. If you're spiritual, the result to another person's faults, failures, shortcomings, and even sins will be meekness, considering yourself, lest you also be tempted, recognizing your own heart, your own weakness, recognizing it's only the grace of God that has saved you and forgiven you and delivered you and kept you. And so whenever we see somebody with a fault or a failure or a shortcoming or maybe even a besetting sin, if we're spiritual, we should respond to that with meekness. Jesus Christ was full of grace and truth. Not 50% grace or 50% truth, but 100% of each. Full of grace, full of truth. And sometimes we seem to be creatures of extremes. It's either all truth, no grace, or all grace, no truth. It's vital to have both in equal measures. Full of grace and truth. Sledgehammer Christians. You know, if you were going for surgery and the surgery was critical, maybe even not critical, but any type of surgery at all, and you got speaking to the physician beforehand, and you saw the tools of the trade, and he had a sledgehammer, and instead of a scalpel he had a chainsaw, and instead of his needle and thread for the stitches he had, I don't know, a staple gun or a nail gun or something like that. I tell you, it wouldn't fill you or inspire you with much confidence. And if he operated on you with such tools, you would certainly die. Friends, it's important if we see somebody struggling, that we have a spirit of meekness, not sledgehammer Christians out to crush and smash and destroy. That is not the spirit of meekness. It's not spiritual. It's not Christ-like. It's not God-honouring. It doesn't help anyone. Let's not be sledgehammer Christians and have a sledgehammer Christianity. I'm not talking about being softly and a teddy bear, milky, sentimental type of Christianity, but a Christianity that is real and biblical and spiritual and Christ-like and God-honouring, that bears people's burdens and restores people and builds them up, rather than smashing and crushing and destroying. It's really typical of the devil, isn't it? He comes to steal, to kill, and to destroy. Let's not be like that, but let's be meek believers. God bless you, friends. Christ Jesus was meek and lowly of heart.